All right. So apparently the share screen isn't really working, and I'm not 100% sure why. Lisa
Not sure
is
what you mean the
actually
share
right
screen
on
isn't working. I see you.
in the recording.
Oh,
Some
I don't
reason
know.
it sounds like the recording isn't recording the share screen. Is that right, Lisa? I was just
Correct.
mentioning that, and then you popped in.
Correct. Yeah.
Is that for?
There was a couple of videos that I've watched now, and the first one or two, I thought, oh well, maybe I wasn't sure if you were using your phone for one, and then the screen. Yeah, I know you've had some sound problems. So, but yeah, I was watching. Which one was I watching last night? Let me just check while you're here, because it was one of the more recent ones. It was the Golden Line. You were talking about the Golden Line. Let me just.
That was recent, yeah. So that would have been with the cell phone, using Shayna's cell phone.
Okay, so it was basic alignment, week 10 of 13, I think it was. Hang on.
Okay, yeah.
Basic alignment, the Golden Line, part one, and that was the 9th of March.
Okay, so my guess is it's associated with, because I'm recording to cloud, and one of the reasons I have to record to cloud is because it says that since I'm using the cell phone for sound, that it won't record the audio. So then I have to use the cloud instead of just recording straight to the computer, because it gives me that message. So
well, it's fine for me.
Yeah, I'll have to figure that out.
I know what you're talking about, even though I can't see that. But if somebody else is, if somebody else is watching it, it's like you start talking about, because you talk about the diagrams that you're drawing, and if they can't see it, it may not make as much sense, and they might just like lose focus on it. You know. Like I don't know what.
Yeah, that does make sense.
You know, this line, because you say, oh, you know, the top line and the middle line, and you know, and you do say that. I know where you're going.
And so you couldn't see any of the shared screen. It just goes to a black screen.
Just on you the whole time.
Oh, it's just on me while I'm talking?
Yep.
That's awkward.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I don't do anything weird while I'm doing the share screen.
I can see the reflection of the screen in your glasses, but that doesn't help.
That is bizarre. Why is it doing that? Maybe because I'm doing speaker view only? I don't know.
Well, go back and just check on that last one that I was just talking about, that basic alignment, the Golden Line. Just see for yourself. I was watching it last night, and because I think it's quite earlier on, you go into the diagram because you draw the diagram of, you know, the top, middle, and bottom of what you're talking about, the Golden Line. And there is no diagram.
Well, I guess if it comes down to it, I'll use the whiteboard behind me. Like I'll set the computer up and the camera up, so I just go old school, and I'll just write it on the board. But I have a feeling, no, I don't know. I think there might be a way for me to flip the camera around so that's legible, because I think it inverts it. So it'd be difficult to read.
Backwards, yeah, the writing will be.
Yeah, I think you can mirror
image, yeah.
Yeah, mirror image. That makes sense.
So you are using two devices then. You are on, it was what I thought.
That's the issue. Yeah, that's the main issue. So if I plug in the device to the computer, it sounds like crap, because I don't know. It's like, it just doesn't sound very good. And then if it uses the microphone on the camera, it sounds like I'm in a tunnel. So but if I use a cell phone and then dial in, I get this beautiful audio.
Yeah, no, it sounds much better how you are with them headphones there. Even it sounds, you're very clear. We have had issues in the past, and you go.
Yeah, so I get the sound issue clear, and now we can't see the share screen, and it's like
Yeah.
Whiteboard
and a mirror.
Right. We'll figure it out. It's all good. Well, but for the sake of this class, then I won't do the whiteboard. But yeah. Hey, Mike, how are you, man? We are recording, and of course I'll upload this to YouTube or whatever, because Mindspace Academy. So let's just start talking about some stuff. one of the things I really like about mind space, and I know I can't be the first person to have thought of this, like you got headspace, and so they're kind of going for the same thing. I think the way that we will go about it will be very obviously particular to T and what we're doing. But one of the things I wanted to point out is that the T practice, and so we're calling it mind space T. It is pretty similar, but mind space, and there was something that I read on Facebook earlier that just made this so timely. But mind space, right from the very beginning, is encouraging the individual to focus on the feeling of peace, mind space. So devil's advocate, if Gene was giving this talk right now and he's like mind space, I'd be like, what space in what? Like, what is he talking about? Like, we got to have some context here. What are you creating space in? Or are you just talking shit again? No, of course we're not. So what we're talking about in mind space is we're creating space in repetitive, habitual, and sometimes just constant cognition, thinking. Sorry, not just all cognition, but specifically thinking in words. So we want to create space in that. And when we do, like there's a lot. I mean, that's just one little deliberate act that we do. And the way that we do it is the deliberate attention on the present moment happening now, and that creates the mind space. But that space that we create does have a feeling. And the good news is you don't have to practice this practice for a year or continuously necessarily, or for 10 years or 20 years before you can finally start to feel that. And you're like, oh, now my practice is finally working. So there's a lot of practices in the world that are kind of given to you that way, and sometimes rightfully so. Like if you want to learn how to climb a mountain, I would learn the basics. If Gene is the mountain instructor, hey man, I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm going to have a beginner mind. I'm going to take good notes, and I'm going to listen to every little thing you have to say about mountain climbing, because I could die. Like, that's some serious stuff. So I'm really going to check in and make sure that I'm receiving every little word that Gene has to say. And if I have questions, comments, concerns, or things I want to remember, I'll write that down and take extemporaneous notes. But I'm going to pay attention. So now the idea is that with this entire approach, from the very beginning, day one, as soon as we do it, especially when we rule of three, we are accessing, or we're creating, space in our mind. And the reason I can use the word creating is because that thinking that we're creating space in is also a creation. Do you see what I mean? We're creating that thought, right? That is a creation. Now, granted, kind of why we're here, but it's not always a deliberate creation, now is it? The thought is not necessarily a deliberate act, but it is being produced, in a manner of speaking. We can see this in some of our instrumentation now. When thoughts are occurring, it can show up as heat because there's something happening. We have electric things occurring, and I'm being very general just because I'm not a brain doctor, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be, something that's not my lane necessarily. But I in general, I do get certain aspects of the brain. So it lights up when you're thinking, and when we're creating emotion, we can see that. And there's lots of different ways that we can analyze this. So we know that it's a happening, that we're producing something with thought, right? Now, when we create space on purpose, so when I choose to pay attention to the present moment on purpose, I am deliberately creating space. We do this in our society from time to time. If Mike and Gene were about to get in a tussle, they're getting angry about sports and his team's better than the other team, and, his 1952 team would beat Michael's current team, and, who is the greatest of all time, really? So they're going at it, and Lisa steps in and says, guys, breathe, separate. create a little space. You go over here, you go over here. I want you to do 100 jumping jacks, and I want you to do 100 push-ups, you know, to divert your mind. That might be too many push-ups. I'm sorry. Do 10 push-ups. 4 push-ups, Gene? Come on, we can get 5 out of you. We'll get that 5, that 5th push-up. All right, so thought is a creation. And when we're doing our practice, we're deliberately creating space. I'm also including, because it's not, I don't think it's a theory to anybody here, but we can feel that space. That space that we create in our mind, it has a feeling. Now, when we go on vacation, we are artificially creating space in our mind. When we go home and have a beer, we are artificially creating space in our mind. When we go home and we watch our favorite TV program, we are artificially creating space in your mind. Very rarely do you watch your favorite program that's drama and it's gripping while you think about, you know, what happened at work and this and that. And if you do, you don't enjoy the program. And if you enjoy the program, you didn't think about the dumb shit. Right, Mike? Like, this is basic stuff. We see this. So what we're going to do is we can use movement. So, you know, what started, I don't know, martial arts and fighting and combat, and I don't know when that started, or, you know, maybe it began as that. I don't know exactly. It did begin as that because I took Kung Fu classes in 1997, like right out of high school. I was in hardcore Kung Fu, Shaolin style, hard on your body type shit every single day. That's the class I got shamed out of, basically, because I didn't feel comfortable choking somebody. And I get it. I needed to apply pressure so that he could do the technique. He couldn't do the technique without me applying some force. I just didn't want to do that. You know, I was too new at martial arts. Maybe he could have picked somebody else, but they didn't make me feel very good about that. Actually, they didn't create the conditions. You know, that's ultimately my garden to tend to, but, you know, they could have been nicer. You know, a class definitely works better when people are nice to each other. So that's just a thing. Okay, so now let's see, what's a good segue into this? Now, so I started to do Tai Chi at one point, and that was kind of martial arty, kind of. Also, I was looking for something that could do more than just martial arts or just fighting. You know, I wanted something that could be meditative at the same time, because I was learning to embody. So I want to make everything meditative, including, you know, martial arts and fighting and combat and all that stuff. I wanted that to be meditative as well. And so I started to learn Tai Chi, and now for me, movement is just my points of attention while moving. It's literally that simple. I am doing my hydrostatic points of attention while moving my body. So my body learns its structure, because if I do maintain a certain type of structure, I can prevent injury. I can make sure that my muscles are the right muscle group, the appropriate muscle group is doing the work, and I'm not, you know, doing weird compensation and stuff like that. And so that I did learn from Tai Chi, that I did learn from, you know, just basic classes on the body and, you know, yoga classes and things like that. We just learn about the shape of the human structure. So the theory behind the movement of mind space is, number one, we're going to create space in our mind. That's it. So if Gene goes into this, and so we're not doing any standing moving today because we're going to warm up into that. And the Mindspace Academy will stay very basic. So we're not going to get into the Tai Chi form. We're not going to get into, you know, some of the I wouldn't say it's more complex. It just takes longer to teach. I mean, it's a long thing that we do with that form. So it just takes time to show you. It's not rocket science or anything. It just takes time. But what we'll do with Mindspace is that we'll do things sometimes that we already know. So I'm not just going to teach new stuff every day. It's like, do you know how to sync the chi? Well, let's just do it a few times, and let's just talk about how this feels and ways that we can use this in our everyday experience, right? So Tai Chi and other traditions introduced me to a concept that is called, or referred to at least sometimes as, non-resistance, or the act of allowing, going with rather than against. The way that I have demonstrated that is to commit to the act of allowing, because that's the one thing that I know is not force, or deliberate attention, the third pillar. The third pillar is never an act of force. I'm simply directing my attention. I'm not trying to change behavior. I'm not trying to feel happy. I'm not trying to get a desired goal or anything like that. However, I do know what will result from deliberate attention, and I know it, so I'm going to keep doing it. But I'm not necessarily doing it with that thought in mind. I'm not entertaining the thought of it. I'm just doing it because I know the result. Does that make sense? So one of the things that I noticed, and I won't go too deep into examples of this, but the things that claim to be, dependent or originate from theories of non-resistance and allowing, they seem to still contain elements of force in trying to control. Now, I don't want to get too much into detail, calling out all these things. It's just something I noticed. And it goes all the way back to when I was learning about religions, too. It's you'll use the word control and allow in the same sentence, or religions that, talk about things, good anger and bad anger. And it's like, no, if you should be angry about what God is angry about. And it's like, wait, what? And so it can get a little bit confusing. So with that in mind, and that's okay. So again, I'm not, the philosophy isn't the issue here, but what we're learning to do is to use technique, specific technique, to create this space in the repetitive habitual thinking. Does that make sense? And one of the ways that I do it, and it's all the movement, every movement that I do will include this element. And we can do this element sitting down, and this element can be focused on at any point throughout the day. And it is a little bit different than the way that other people talk about it, but it's when we begin to focus on breathing in mind space. So the idea with breathing is just to create space. And when you create space with breathing, it's just the act of it being deliberate. Just the act of it being on purpose is enough to create that space in the repetitive habitual cognition, at least a little bit. And then if we have some accumulation going, like we're angry or we're frustrated, then we need more points of attention. And I recommend including the breath, including some kind of verbal dialogue in your mind to help point you back to the present moment. And hopefully we can get going back into the direction of present, mindful. I'm not going to entertain repetitive habitual thoughts that don't serve me. I'm present. I can do this. And so it might look like you're still just talking to yourself. And that's okay, because you are. But you're talking yourself into a new direction. And it's not necessarily replacing an old thought with a new thought. So we're not doing that, but we're using thought to point back to the present moment. And that creates space. So the way that I breathe is a little bit different than the way that breathing is commonly introduced. And it's the way that I breathe when I do my rule of three, depending on how severe the accumulation is. I haven't had to do the deep belly breath, in a long time. Every now and then I'll do an audible exhale so Shana can hear, but I'm doing that on purpose to be a booger. So, hey, that's what people do sometimes. So it's like what Neo does when he's irritated. He lets you hear his exhale. I call it audible exhale. Okay, here we go again. Now, when I would go into a yoga studio, and I have gone into some, when I would go into retreats, when I would go into Tai Chi classes, when I would just talk to people, they would always tell me what to do with my breath. They would never evaluate where my breath was originally, and very rarely would their advice be any different. It's always breathe deeply from your belly. I get it. And I'm not saying that that's something that you shouldn't do, because there's times where I would do that. If I'm so far into repetitive habitual cognition, is it still robotic right now? Or are we good? Okay. Yeah, I got 3 bars, but maybe we're accessing too much internet here still. Okay, so rather than, entertaining the repetitive, I don't know where I was with that. So before I hit robot video, but I can just pick up. So ultimately, again, we're creating space where we're going to approach the breath a little bit different. And I'm not necessarily telling you where to breathe, although that will come into play eventually. But what I'm suggesting is that we learn to just pay attention to the breath, to allow it to be whatever it is. But we're going to do the very simple act of gently placing our attention. If you need a more deep breath because you're irritated or you see yourself going towards maybe even a violent act, heaven forbid, I don't think anybody here, is that close to that type of cognition or output. But, if you were, then redirecting with multiple points of attention, and I call that the rule of 3. The breath is a part of the rule of 3, and sometimes it is a deep belly breath. You can do reverse abdominal, or you can just do the expansion on the inhale and then let it relax on the exhale, and you can be very deliberate with that breath, and we call that counterbalancing. Doing that does require a little bit of energy, but doing that is better than getting violent or getting even more angry or spending hours thinking about something that doesn't serve me. That's a lot of time for it to accumulate. It's a lot of accumulation, cause and effect. It's just sitting there accumulating and adding and becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and worse and worse. So moving forward, when we do the movement class, we will get up, we will stand up. It's going to be very simple though. We'll do very simple breathing exercises. And the primary one is syncing the chi. And that would be a part typically of my rule of 3, where I would do this movement. Ida painted that picture of me doing that movement because in class, I would do it. I didn't even realize at first probably that I was showing it, but that's a part of, and I'm doing it deliberately, like I'm doing it on purpose when I'm redirecting, but I'm using a little bit of movement, a little bit of breath, and I'm using words. And then I go a little bit further typically, and I'll put a point of attention in my body and then a point of attention outside of my body. So my rule of 3 is typically 5 points at least. But hey, I was creating some severe psychological suffering. So I had some things that needed to be redirected. I was punching myself in the face, telling myself I'm not good enough and all kinds of things like that for far too long. That's passivity. I'm just letting myself do it. No, and I didn't use force. I just went back to the present moment, back to the present moment. That is never force, back to the present moment more fully. With breath, back to the present moment. With movement, at the same time, back to the present moment. With a mantra, I can do this. It might take time, but I can do it. That's fine. It doesn't have to be now. The mind is on an erroneous time scale. I can do this. Relax. One step in front of you. It's the step right now. You can do this. Just breathe. And the breathing technique that I use now and that I use most often outside of an emergency thing is just smooth, relaxed, least amount of muscular tension type of breathing. Eventually, it will look like your whole body is breathing. And that's how babies breathe. You know how it's so interesting to me because I had a yoga instructor at a Tai Chi retreat, interestingly, tell me that babies breathe from their belly. And I remember when my son kicked me in the face when he was born and I was trying to change his diaper. And I remember looking at him while he was breathing, and it wasn't just his belly. That's not true. He didn't have just his belly going up and down. His whole body was involved in that breath. When he was sleeping, his whole body was vibrating and moving, and it was essentially engaging in the breath. The entire body was. And so that's a difference than what people were trying to tell me that I babies breathe or that I'm supposed to just breathe from my belly. I don't see that. I don't observe that. When I look at my dog, he's breathing with his whole body. not just as chest. I get it. That's why we want to go to our belly, is because a lot of people are breathing with their chest, and that can create all kinds of issues in your physical body. The energy doesn't flow. Blood doesn't flow very well when all of our energy and breath is up here. I get that. But if I just shove it all down there, I'm going from one extreme to another, and I don't see any yoga instructors that I've ever met walking around all day belly breathing like that. 10 seconds in, 10 seconds out. No. Let me follow you around all day. I bet I catch you breathing with no attention on it. And it won't be 10 seconds in, 10 seconds out. It's like Joshua said one time, when the tree blows in the wind, not just one part moves, the whole tree sways. That's right. I could see that relationship in nature to the breath. Yeah, the whole body, when one part of the body moves, that's the Tai Chi, and that's the movement. The whole body is involved in the motion. Some maybe not as much as others. You know, these hands might be more involved than these elbows in this particular motion, but ultimately everything is working together. It's not just one isolated part, and that's the same thing with the breath. So what we're looking to do is to place attention on the breath without trying to force it. Let's say your breath is a little bit shallow. Fine. Just pay attention to it. Just allow it. It is what it is. Talk to yourself the moment you notice that you're trying to change it. It is what it is. I have this breath, and right now it's a little bit shallow. That's okay. I don't have to try to make it. Do you see the force? Trying to make your breath other than what it is, especially rapidly. So Gene is all pumped up and his breath is out of control, and I'm like, Gene, I would like you to find peace in this moment and breathe in a relaxed manner. And he's like, what the fuck? Like, no. So we add other elements to the breathing. We talk. I can do this. I can relax. I add movement. You know, maybe if somebody was right in front of me, I wouldn't. You know, the person at the cash register that was complaining about the movie, I didn't do that right in front of them. I excused myself, went into the closet where we would wash our hands, and then I did it. So, yeah, it would have felt weird to do that right in front of the guy. But if I'm about to get violent, hey, I'd rather be weird than violent. So call me what you want. Fortunately, it wasn't quite getting to that point yet. I was ready to tell the guy about himself, and so I still probably would have gotten fired, but I wasn't ready for violence yet. So one of the things that we'll be talking about is using the rule of three to create space when our thinking really has momentum, when we're really thinking bullshit, when we're worrying, when we're complaining, when we're arguing, when we're trying to be right. That cognition is not productive. We're not communicating, we're not learning, we're not being creative. We're just telling other people what we think we know and insisting that they agree. I'm right, you're wrong. That's energy just being spent, and I don't see the functionality in it all the time, really any of the time. But debate, fine. Talk about a debate. I'm getting information from you. Maybe you have some perspective that I've never seen before, and that's a good debater. A good debater will help you see different perspective and also not try to change you, just offer their perspective, and then another person offers their perspective, and we learn from one another. That doesn't happen a lot in the world today, especially on Facebook. Oh, good Lord. It's not, I'm prepared to learn. It's let me tell you about you. All right. So today is just the first kind of introduction to what we'll be doing. But moving forward, we're going to be collaborating with what I call the smooth breath. And so today's kind of an introduction to that. So and I know most of you guys, you've heard me talk about this many times before, but kind of a reminder, next Wednesday, we'll take it a step further. And what do we do with our breath? How, I'll give even more examples of what are we doing with our breath. We can use our imagination. That's a great way to interact with your breath without using force. Imagine your body expanding rather than trying to physically manipulate your lungs. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Like, you can imagine whatever you want to. So, Gene, have you ever seen of course you have fireworks, the ones that blow up in perfect circles? So I literally mean you can imagine that type of thing happening every time you inhale. You don't have to imagine the contraction if you don't want to, or you can, it doesn't matter. But if you just imagine that every time you inhale that there's this expansion, that's using your imagination with the breath. You probably won't be able to do that all day, and you probably won't want to do that all day, because that requires a high degree of attention. And that's a great redirection technique. It's a great rooting technique to establish yourself. Probably a shitty technique when it comes to listening. Because if you want to listen to somebody and here you are imagining all of this stuff, it can get a little bit tricky. I can't really hear what Gene is trying to say. So I'll use different techniques when I'm listening. So when I want to listen to Gene, maybe I do defocused vision and I just breathe smoothly. And I'll be honest, this is something I did. You don't have to do this. But if I really want to hear what Gene has to say, I imagine words. I have this streaming, what's that called? Closed caption of what Gene is saying, so that I process his words without thinking my own, because I can't listen to Gene if I'm thinking my own thoughts. But also, if I have 6 points of deliberate attention that aren't Gene, I ain't going to hear shit Gene has to say either, because my focus is still not quite on Gene. So our attention can be 2 degrees. So if Gene is talking to me and I really want to hear him, I'm going to make sure that my tricks of attention are geared towards receiving his words. And then when it's time for me to talk, if I've just been in the mode of receiving, what I give back is going to be more productive. It's going to be more in alignment with what he was just saying, as opposed to me thinking my own thoughts while he's talking. And then I say something that really had nothing to do with his point because I wasn't listening anyway. So Gene might as well not even have been talking because I wasn't listening. And what I'm saying has nothing to do with what he just said. So now we're not even communicating. We're basically talking to ourselves out loud together. That's not the best use of our cognition. So I remember that was a question that was asked. So when you're using your tricks of attention, we will learn different tricks of attention that require different degrees of attention. So I do pay attention to my breathing when I'm listening to somebody. That's one of those lowest hanging fruits. It's really easy. But I don't necessarily want to try to control it too much. I just want to let it do its thing, and I'll use my imagination to make sure that I'm not just trying to control it. So when we do sitting meditation, we're going to begin with just smooth breathing. When we do moving meditations, and it'll be just basic stuff, syncing the chi, and maybe we'll get into some Superman stuff that Joshua taught us, just basic stuff, and we're just going to create space. Does that make sense? All right, so that's kind of just a precursor to what we're going to be doing. It won't always be new things. Sometimes we'll just do a little bit of syncing the chi, talk a little bit more about the breath and the body and how all this fits into that space that we want to create. Because if in that moment I'm about to get violent, I can create space, I have the opportunity to redirect. I have the opportunity to create enough space that I can fill it with something different, something other than anger and misbehavior, for example. Misbehavior, something that would get you arrested. I don't know. It seems while listening, people are just waiting till you finish so they can say their thought, right? And you can often tell when that occurs, because what they say, they're not asking questions about what you just said. It doesn't really seem like, I remember in high school, we used to do this thing called rapping, rappers, hip hop. We would freestyle. And that's essentially, you would just make shit up as you go along. And I was actually pretty good at it. I sounded terrible. And yeah, sometimes they change the subject even, but So I sounded terrible, but my lyrics were actually quite creative. So I was actually pretty good with making interesting lyrics. And one thing we would try to do is we would try to essentially begin with what the other person just ended with. That way to make sure that it's a freestyle and we're not just taking something that we wrote down at home, because that's cheating. So if Gene all of a sudden is saying something and it's like, hey, wait a second, that's not only is that really good, but that doesn't really seem like what we're talking about. He's probably just rapping something that he wrote down, and that's cheating. That's not freestyling. That's just rapping. Like that's different. So the way that we would prevent that is, so if Gene ended with the word couch, I would have to rap about that. Like I would have to say something in some way in relation to a couch. And then that proved that I was listening. Incidentally, I haven't connected to this since I was a kid. I would rap better if I wasn't trying to think about it in advance. And so if while Gene was rapping, I was thinking of my lines, I would get like 2 good sentences together and then I would have nothing. I would just fall completely flat. So Gene is rapping, he's doing his thing, and I'm over here thinking, okay, so I'm going to rap about, my clothes and how they're nice, and I'm going to rhyme that with Miami Vice and how you better think twice, and okay, I got it. And then now Gene is done, and I do that, and that's okay, but then I got nothing because I didn't plan a 5-minute rap. I just planned like 2 or 3 sentences. But I found that when I would just let the other person do their thing, and then I would just create space, and then I would pick up with what they left off with, I would actually do something pretty good for a decent length of time. And then when I would start to screw up, Mike comes in to save the day, and he uses the most recent thing that I had just said to begin with. And then that's how we would do it. Hey, story time with Ernest. That's old school stuff, though. That's like 1995 type stuff, 97 type stuff. Right. That's old school. All right. So tomorrow we are going to do another Mindspace Academy. Wait, today's Wednesday. Oh, heck. We have a day off tomorrow, don't we? Yeah, I think Thursday is our day off. Where the heck is my schedule? Well, it's getting to the point where I need a secretary, full-time secretary, administrative assistant, help. That's the bottom line. Okay, so yeah, tomorrow.
If you want.
Nothing tomorrow, right?
I don't have anything on Thursday, but we've got Friday group study at 1 p.m. and then you do Monday, Tuesday, Sunday classes at 7 a.m. And then today, Wednesday, movement, meditation, and yin yoga, 1 p.m.
Yeah, and we will get into yoga and stuff. And so that's also another thing. It may be best from this point forward to have some space to do stuff in. So thank you, Lisa. That's awesome. And just as a side note, I think I did change it on the website already, but Friday's class is theory because I didn't want to do 2 group studies. So, I mean, whenever somebody has questions, it could end up a group study, but that's going to be the 1 p.m. on Friday is theory. Okay. I'm doing a class on theory.
Okay.
Yeah. What's possible? That's fun. I think it's important I do it every morning when I wake up. I imagine what's possible, what I think is possible. Other people might tell me it's impossible, that we could never have a species that isn't violently inflicting anger and frustration on itself. But I say, I disagree. I don't see any principle that says that human beings cannot overcome this old school biological tendency towards violence. We don't need that anymore. It doesn't serve us. We got more than enough guns to protect ourselves from natural predators from now until the end of time. So a bear is never going to be that big of a deal as long as we have, the technology. It's not just weapons, but the technology that we have. So we can continue to create technology that benefits us, but not technology that's necessarily being built around cognitive dysfunction. We can create things like, what if we created a machine that was cost efficiently just taking salt water to fresh water so that we could drink it? There's nothing wrong with that. And then, like Shayna said, make sure that it doesn't hurt the environment in the process. We can create technology that's win for humans, win for the world, win for the animals and plants around it. We can do that. I think we're capable of that if that's what we were to focus on. But we got some work to do before, as a species, we're ready to do that. Right now, we're still worrying about who has the fastest car or the most Christmas lights, or I don't know. I like Christmas lights. I'm not judging. Yeah. I don't put them up, but I do enjoy looking at other people's Christmas lights. But yeah, quick fixes. We're getting to the root, the origination of the thought, where the attention is. Do we have space? So is the thought creative, or is the thought same old, same old? All right, well, I will see you at 6 a.m. for Facebook Live tomorrow if you can make it. I'm working on getting the names of the pages changed, and I think Facebook isn't going to let me go back to coffee time, so I don't know. I'll just have to make a new page then. I don't know. I made the coffee time page a different page, and now it won't let me go back. So, but all right, if you want to sign up for a one-on-one, you can do that. It's mindspacementor.com. And we have class at mindspaceacademy.com. And before you know it, I am going to have some of the most comprehensive course material at mindspacecourses.com. And I tell you, the course that we did before was wildly successful. Shayna and I were talking about that. Like, we had, I think in like the first 3 months, we had like 500 people sign up to that sucker. And people just loved how well it flowed. We can do that and more now. So it's all much more organized and clear than it was in 2018. So really excited about the focus and the clarity and the direction that everything seems to be going. Has more of a grandiose kind of vision down the road, but we have the step right in front of us, and that's class right now. And Facebook Live at 6 a.m. tomorrow. So, all right, if you can make it, I will see you guys there. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out with me. And remember, future movement classes on Wednesday. Let's make sure we got at least a little bit of space. I don't actually need a lot. I might just use this space right here just to prove that what we're doing, you don't have to have a whole facility. Like, it's not about, because that actually could become an excuse that you think about. You start thinking to yourself, well, I don't have the room. Well, if only I had wood floors. Well, if only I had the right workout gear. Well, if only I had the right Tai Chi pajamas. Well, if only Ernest was really here to teach me and then there we go again. We're just creating space in our mind. So you don't need that much room to do it. Hey, I like my Tai Chi PJs. There was no judgment with that, Lisa. They feel good. I like how things feel on my skin. That's just another sensory attention point. So if I were going to say in hydrostasy, in terms of movement, if you do your form with pajamas or with the silks, it's because you're using that as a point of attention. Who am I to judge that? I would do that. Hell yeah. I like how things feel on my skin. And when I'm moving too, like you can feel it moving on your skin, you're coiling and twisting. Ain't nothing wrong with that. I mean, I don't find anything.
Are they called pajamas though?
No, not really. That's what some people call it, who kind of poke fun at it. You know, Tai Chi people who are wearing the Tai Chi clothing, traditional Chinese clothing for Tai Chi. People who don't think that that's necessary or who don't really value that call them pajamas. And I do think that has a place. I don't demonize it at all. I think it's fine. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I wouldn't use that as, oh man, I can't practice. I don't have my Tai Chi silks. But if I do have them and I want to, I will. Okay, so I will see you guys again tomorrow, 6 a.m., and then for the Facebook Live, and then I'll see you again on Friday at, I think, 1, and we're going to do some theory instead of just the open study. We'll talk about a little bit of theory and really start to push the mind space theory about creating space, feeling into that space that we've just created, even when it's the rule of 3 or even when it's a trick of attention, and we'll emphasize that feeling. You can do it now, you can do it in the very beginning, you can do it the first day you learn it, you can do it every day afterwards. It's not a 40-year process, a 30-year process. You can create peace right now. And if you're creating a lot of suffering, I get it. You're going to need a lot more degree of attention to create that space. But hey, we know what we're working with and we know how to do it. So it's just a matter of remembering. All right. Well, I'll see you guys tomorrow, Facebook Live at 6 a.m. if you can make it. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
All right. See you. Bye.